Hello, wildlings. I'm your Creepsmith, and you found my Fear Forge. Lucky you. Thank you for returning for today's tale, the finale of The HarborMaster by Robert W. Chambers. It took me a week to perfect my arrangements for transporting the Great Ox by water to Port of Waves, where a lumber schooner was to be sent from Petite Saint-Isolde, chartered by me for a voyage to New York. I had constructed a cage made of osiers in which my ox were to squat until they arrived at Bronx Park. My telegrams to Professor Farrago were brief. One merely said, "Victory!" Another explained that I wanted no assistance, and a third read, "Schooner chartered, arrived New York July 1st, sent furniture van to foot of Bluff Street." My week as a guest of Mr. Halyard proved interesting. I wrangled with that invalid to his heart's content. I worked all day on my osier cage. I hunted the thimble in the moonlight with the pretty nurse. Sometimes we even found it. As for the thing they called the HarborMaster, I saw it a dozen times, but always either at night or so far away and so close to the sea that of course no trace of it remained when I reached the spot, rifle in hand. I had quite made up my mind that the so-called HarborMaster was someone demented, wandered from heaven knows where, perhaps shipwrecked and gone mad from his sufferings. Still, it was far from pleasant to know that the creature was strongly attracted to my potential paramour. She, however, persisted in regarding the HarborMaster as a sea creature. She earnestly affirmed that it had gills, like a fish's gills, that it had a soft, fleshy hole for a mouth, and that its eyes were luminous and lidless and fixed. Besides, she said with a shudder, it's all that slate color like a porpoise, and it looks as wet as a sheet of India rubber in a dissecting room. The day before I was to set sail with my ox in a catboat bound for Port of Waves, Halyard trundled up to me in his chair and announced his intention of going with me. Going where? I asked. To Port of Waves, and then to New York, he replied tranquilly. I was doubtful, and my lack of cordiality apparently hurt his feelings. "Oh, of course, if you need the sea voyage," I began. "I don't. I need you," he said sagely. "I need the stimulus of our daily quarrel. I have never disagreed so pleasantly with anybody in my life. I am 100% better than I was last week." I was somewhat inclined to resent this, but something in the deep-lined face of the invalid softened me. Besides, I had taken a hearty liking to the old pig. "I don't want any mawkish sentiment about it," he said, observing me closely. "I won't permit anyone to feel sorry for me. Do you understand?" "I will trouble you to use a different tone in addressing me," I replied hotly. "I will feel sorry for you if I choose to," and our usual quarrel proceeded, to his deep satisfaction. By 6 o'clock the next evening I had Halyard's luggage stowed away in the catboat, and the pretty nurse's effects corded down with the newly hatched auk chicks in a hat box on top. She and I placed the osier cage aboard, securing it firmly, and then throwing tablecloths over the ox heads, we let those simple and dignified birds down the path and across the plank at the little wooden pier. Together we locked up the house, while Halyard stormed at both of us and wheeled himself furiously up and down the beach below. At the last moment she forgot her thimble, but we found it. I forget where. "Come on!" shouted Halyard, waving his shawls furiously. "What the devil are you about up there?" He received our explanation with a sniff, and we trundled him aboard without further ceremony. "Don't run me across the plank like a steamer trunk," he shouted as I shot him dexterously into the cockpit. But the wind was dying away, and I had no time to dispute with him then. The sun was setting above the pine-clad ridge as our sail flapped and partly filled, and I cast off, and began a long tack east by south to avoid the spouting rocks on our starboard bow. The seabirds rose in clouds as we swung across the shoal. The black surf ducks scuttered out to sea, the gulls tossing their sun-tipped wings into the ocean, riding the rollers like bits of froth. Already we were sailing slowly out across that great hole in the ocean, 5 miles deep, the most profound sounding ever taken in the Atlantic. The presence of great heights or great depths, seen or unseen, always impresses the human mind, or perhaps oppresses it. We were very silent. The sunlight stain on the cliff and beach had deepened to crimson and then faded into somber purple bloom that lingered long after the rose tint died out on the zenith. Our progress was maddeningly slow at times. Although the sail filled with the rising land breeze, we scarcely seemed to move at all. "Of course," said the pretty nurse, "we couldn't be aground in the deepest hole in the Atlantic."
"Scarcely,"
said Halyard sarcastically.
"unless we were grounded on a whale."
"What is that soft thumping?" I asked. "Have we run afoul of a barrel or a log?" It was almost too dark to see, but I leaned over the rail and swept the water with my hand. Instantly, something smooth glided under it, like the back of a great fish, and I jerked my hand back to the tiller. At the same moment, the whole surface of the water seemed to begin to purl with a sound like the breaking of froth in a champagne glass.
"What is the matter with you?"
asked Halyard sharply. "A fish came up under my hand," I said. "A porpoise or something." With a low cry, the pretty nurse jumped and clasped my arm in both her hands. "Listen!" she whispered. "It's purring around the boat."
"What is?" shouted Halyard. "I won't have anything purring around me."
At that moment, to my amazement, I saw the boat had stopped entirely. Although the sail was full and the pennant had fluttered from the masthead, something too was tugging at the rudder, twisting it and jerking it until the tiller strained and creaked in my hand. All at once it snapped, the tiller swinging uselessly, and the boat whirled around, heeling in the stiffening wind, and drove shoreward. It was then that I, ducking to escape the wildly swinging boom, caught a glimpse of something ahead, something that a sudden wave seemed to toss on the deck and leave there, wet and flapping. A man with round, fixed, fishy eyes and soft, slaty skin. But the horror of the thing were that the two gills that swelled and relaxed spasmodically, emitting a rasping, purring sound. Two gasping, blood-red gills, all fluted and scalloped and distended. Frozen with amazement and repugnance, I could do nothing but stare at the creature. I felt the hair stirring on my head and the icy sweat on my forehead.
"It's the HarborMaster!"
screamed Halyard. The creature had gathered himself into a wet lump, squatting motionlessly in the bows under the mast. His lidless eyes were phosphorescent like the eyes of a living codfish. After a while, I felt that either fright or disgust was going to strangle me where I sat, but it was only the arms of our pretty nurse clasped around me in a frenzy of terror. There was not a firearm aboard that we could get at. Halyard's hand crept backward where a steel-shod boat hook lay, and I also made a clutch at it. In the next moment I had it in my hand and staggered forward, but the boat was already tumbling shoreward among the breakers, and the next I knew, the HarborMaster ran at me like a colossal rat, just as the boat rolled over through the surf, spilling freight and passengers among the seaweed-covered rocks. When I came back to myself, I was thrashing about knee-deep in a rocky pool, blinded by the water and half suffocated, while under my feet, like a stranded porpoise, the HarborMaster made the water boil in his efforts to upset me.
but his limbs seemed soft and boneless. He had no nails, no teeth, and he bounced and thumped and flapped and splashed like a fish while I rained blows upon him with the boat hook that sounded like blows on a football. And all the while his gills were blown out and frothing and purring, and his lidless eyes looked deep into mine until, nauseated and trembling, I dragged myself back to the beach where already the nurse had alternately wrung her hands and her petticoats and was seeing to finding her charge. All the while, out beyond the cove, Halyard was bobbing up and down, afloat in his invalid's chair, trying to steer shoreward. He was the maddest man I ever saw. "Have you killed that rubber-headed thing yet?" he roared. "I can't kill it," I shouted breathlessly. "I might as well try and kill a football." "Can't you punch a hole in it?" he bawled. "If only I can get at him." His words were drowned in a thunderous splashing roar of great broad flippers beating the sea, and I saw the gigantic forms of my two great auks, followed by their chicks, blundering past in a shower of spray, diving headlong out into the ocean. "Oh, Lord," I said. "I can't stand it." And for the first time in my life, I fainted, peacefully and appropriately, at the feet of the pretty nurse. It is within the range of possibility that this story may be doubted. It doesn't matter to me. Nothing can add to the despair of a man who has lost his greatest finds. As for Halyard, nothing affects him except his involuntary sea bath, and that did him so much good that he writes me from the south that he's going on a walking tour through Switzerland, if I will join him. I might have joined him if he and his caretaker had not married. I wonder whether... But, of course, this is no place for speculation. In regard to the creature, the HarborMaster, you may believe it, or not, as you choose. But if you hear of any great auks being found, kindly throw a tablecloth over their heads and notify the authorities at the Zoological Gardens of Bronx Park, New York. The reward is $10,000. Well, it's good to see that this has ended well for everyone. Better for some than others. Those of you with an ear for description will notice that not only did this story go on to be the inspiration for H.P. Lovecraft's Shadow over Innsmouth, but also for the Gill Man, the monster from such classics as The Creature from the Black Lagoon. So thank you for listening, wildlings, and until next we meet, stay scary and make the most of your nights.